right. Let's see, slideshow. Come on. All right. Can everybody see my screen? Okay.
Yes.
Thumbs up and all of that. This is the Tiny Talk for tonight is the rollout or at least the presentation of the NOAA standard for tiny houses on wheels. And I wanted to kind of go over some of the um, background behind all of this before we jump into the real details. Um, there's some standards efforts that have been going on out there for quite a while. There's ICC 1200 and 1205, which do allow remote inspections. That's one of the things that is really um, specific about NOAA is that we do um, mainly do remote inspections. We have done some in-person ones, and some of the modulars are requiring that now, but we're mainly a remote inspection company. And then there is currently going on an ICC THIA 1215. I don't know where that's going to be. There's been some attempts to get this into International Residential Code, and just this last spring, that got voted down. So the next time we could see something in IRC is going to be 2030. There's an ASTM E06.26 that's for tiny houses on wheels, and I'm part of that committee where we're just specifically dealing with the attachment of tiny houses to the trailer, trying to get something going in that realm. And then in the inspection and certification world, there's the ASTM E541, which basically says if you're an engineer, then you can be authorized to be an inspector or be a certification company for modulars. Uh, and that's what some of the third party agencies are using for their criterion and for their credentials. What NOAA has is ISO IEC 17020, which is an accreditation, an actual accreditation, and we get audited every year. Leanne does a fantastic job of handling that. Um, but the tiny houses on wheels are a new housing type. And when I go to the Innovative Housing Showcase in Washington, D.C., or we talk to NAHB or National Association of Home Builders or HUD, they're all talking about the tiny houses on wheels as a new housing type. And so that's kind of what we keyed in on this standard, was that we're dealing with a new housing type. It's on a trailer, and it's a tiny house that is up to 400 square feet. That is the number that Appendix Q pulled out. It's also less than 400 square feet is the number that ANSI 119.5, the park model standard uses. So the RV standards are the NFPA 1192, which is for travel trailers, and the ANSI 119.5 is for the park models. And both of them RV standards use NFPA 70. International Residential Code uses the whole National Electric Code too. RV standards just uses, well, the first four chapters, but it's mainly Article 551 and 552. So what happened was we realized that some of the jurisdictions were accepting tiny houses in their areas, um, and they were using the ANSI 119.5 standard, which was a park model standard designed for temporary use only. And it's not the ANSI product does not really have the energy and the structural standards needed for people that are going to stay full time in a tiny house. You can put R5 insulation in the walls and the floor and R7 in the ceiling, and you can use 2x3 studs and things like that. So what we did here at NOAA, we developed what's called a NOAA Plus standard, and the NOAA Plus standard takes ANSI 119.5 and of course National Electric Code and makes amendments to that. And you can find that on our website on the tab of the NOAA standard tab. You'll find the NOAA Plus standard. Then some jurisdictions have started adopting the NOAA Plus standard. Blaine County and Boise, Idaho, and some places like that are writing in their ordinance that it has to be the NOAA Plus standard. And in California, where they're having a housing issue, they've mandated that ADUs need to happen everywhere. They have to have an ADU ordinance. So some of them are taking the ANSI 119.5 standard and adopting these tiny houses as satisfying the state mandate for ADUs. However, places like San Luis Obispo said the ANSI standard's not sufficient enough, so they've increased the insulation value in that. In fact, I think City of Haley, I believe the City of Haley actually increased our insulation value in the ANSI 119.5 or in the NOAA Plus standard to we have it as R19. They wanted R28. So then we moved from there. We said, okay, let's see what else is out there, and we developed what's called the NOAA dwelling standard. You can find that on our website too, and that's based off of IRC, International Residential Code. It has, we basically can do that, but we can't do it from the trailer. Now, IRC doesn't have anything about chassis or trailers or anything in it, but we can do it from the trailer up. The only challenge is there were some issues with this new housing type being small, having moisture issues. And so we had to, in this dwelling standard, we increased some ventilation thing, either the bath fan or some additional, what do they call it? Where they take the moisture out of the air. Somebody help me out with it. Dehumidifiers. Dehumidifiers, either standalone dehumidifiers or mini splits that have a dehumidifier cycle, or an air exchanger that's going to help exchange your air. So the NOAA dwelling basically takes IRC, but doesn't talk about trailers, except that the trailer needs to be manufactured from a trailer manufacturer, built from a real trailer manufacturer. If you build something yourself, it has to be engineered. And we also, IRC does say you have to have R38 in the ceiling, and we're always fighting ceiling heights in the loft. So in IRC, there is an exception of R30 in the ceiling for vaulted ceilings. They say if a house is up to 20% of that house could be R30 instead of R38. So we just eliminated the up to 20% and just allowed people to build to the R30, which you can get in a 2x6 with closed cell foam. So we were able to keep in the NOAA dwelling, we were able to keep the heights that you're always battling heights in the loft and still do an IRC. The other thing we had an issue with in that is the loft window. In Appendix Q, they had the vent. You had, you know, in the roof, they had a roof egress window up there, and so we made in the dwelling standard, we made the landing part of the loft so that now you can pretty easily get an IRC egress window, which is it's 5.0 square feet and 20 inches wide and 24 inches tall minimum. And if it's second floor, it's 5.7, but on first floor, it's 5.0. So anyway, so we were able to get that done in the NOAA dwelling standard. So the NOAA standard for tiny houses on wheels, which is what we really want to focus on tonight, it's a standalone standard. It's not based off of anything like IRC or NFPA 1192 or ANSI 119.5. I mean, it doesn't take those and then amend them, you know, like adopt them and then amend them. It actually is a standalone based on codes and standards and best practices that are out there. Um, and it is not a consensus standard, which means that usually in a consensus standard, like what we're doing with E06.26, there has to be input, and you have to overcome any objections that people have. Everybody has to have a consensus that this is the right standard to go, and it's a long process to do that. And when that happens, NOAA is ready to bow to whatever the industry wants as far as a tiny house on wheels standard. But we felt like we needed something better than the ANSI 119.5. And so we started with the NOAA Plus and then moved to the NOAA Dwelling. And now we're putting out this standalone standard. But what we're wanting to do with that as ASTM E06.26, as they develop things like the attachment of the trailer to the trailer frame, that'll become part of this NOAA standard for tiny houses on wheels. In a standard, there's basically two types of standards. There's the prescriptive, and then there's performance. And usually you start out with performance. In other words, this is the snow load, this is the wind load, and that's what the performance that it has to do. And that's pretty difficult for you guys as builders to deal with, because now you have to go find out how do you build to 140-mile-an-hour wind loads, or 30-pound, or 200. I think Pacer County has 255 pounds of snow load, which I've never heard of before, but you have to have those engineered and designed. So what we're trying to do here with the NOAA standard is have as much prescriptive as we possibly can, so that you can build from that without having to hire an engineer to go out and engineer everything that you do. So it's fluid. In other words, as the IRC is on a 3-year code cycle, so it takes 3 years to get things into International Residential Code. But with this standard, if something good comes along from ASTM or some other place like NFPA 1192 or someplace, we can go in and adopt that as revised, what we call revise the standard. This is a de facto standard. We call it a de facto standard, not a consensus standard. So with that, I'm going to go into the standard, but before I do, I just wanted to open it up for any questions that you guys might have along the way here. Anybody totally confused, or are we ready to move into the meat of what we want to talk about today? Okay.
Robin, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, this is Brian. I'm in Idaho. We build shipping container homes and
Yes.
throws and ADUs. And you mentioned Boise and Haley. So I'm just curious. Not curious, but I just want to focus on that when you get a chance.
Yeah. Well, basically, what happened in several places in Idaho, they wanted to allow tiny houses in, but they didn't like the ANSI standard, and so we did with their commissioners, um, and we did a Zoom call with them. And basically, what happened was one of our manufacturers was pushing, and that's how most standards have happened, or whether we've gotten in as modular builders in some of the southern states, or what tiny houses in through that. It's usually a manufacturer that knows somebody in the county or the city, and they're friendly to tiny houses, and they say, we'd like to put some tiny houses in, but there's no ordinance there. And so they create an ordinance. And in that ordinance, we sometimes we have the opportunity to participate in the writing of that ordinance. And in Idaho, they started out adopting our NOAA Plus standard. with a few revisions on the R value. And they also wrote in the ordinance that the tiny house has to be inspected like we inspect it at every stage of construction, because we don't, just inspect the factory. We inspect every house, and we inspect every house at the various stages of construction, just like a site-built home. And then we record that inspection, and so it's made available to the jurisdiction if they would like to see it. So they wrote in the ordinance that it doesn't have to be NOAA doing the inspection, but it has to be inspected the way NOAA does their remote inspections. So, if you want to get with Leanne or one of us a little bit later, we can give you that ordinance, and we have a template that you can take to your jurisdiction, and they can basically put their name on that, and it's pretty much written for them. If they want to adopt these in here. Now, this is something new. They haven't seen this, and they may like this better. But there's three of them right now. There's the NOAA Plus, NOAA Dwelling, and this one here, which we haven't rolled out yet. But when it rolls out, that's the way that it will get introduced. Is somebody's going to say, we want to put this into our city or in our county, and they're going to take it to their commissioner, and the commissioner is going to look at it. Probably the building department is going to look at it, and they're going to say, this is the best thing we've seen so far, because it is. And so hopefully that's what's going to happen with this standard right here.
Okay,
so,
that
anyway,
sounds
Brian,
great. I appreciate that, and maybe modular in the future.
Well, this would we want to focus on tiny houses on wheels, and we'll go through that here in a minute. Not as one of these other types of things. We want a tiny house on wheels to be its own standalone product, its own. It's not going to be something else, and I'll go through that in this standard where we talk about how this is not a modular. Now, some jurisdictions want to make it a modular, and they can call it a modular, or they can call it a factory built, which it is factory built. But what standards do you use for a modular? Well, they don't have anything in the state codes for modulars to address the chassis. So we're having, in places that are using modulars, we're having to deal with and add some things to their standards, or they're having to adopt our standards as the modular standard for their tiny house. So we don't care whether they call it a modular, but we want to stay away from the word modular, in that when you think of a modular home, you think of something that's built in a factory, brought out on a trailer, but taken off of that trailer and sat on a foundation. And that's what we kind of want to stay away from
Gotcha.
there.
Okay. All right. Sounds good. Let me say hi to Leanne. I've talked to you a few times, but I just want to say hi. Good to see you now.
Hi, Brian.
So, hi there. How you doing?
How are ya? Thanks for joining.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Hey, Robin, I'd like to add, if I may, can I add a few things to that? This
Sure.
is John Dyer. Yeah.
Yeah, John.
5 years ago, I'm in California, which has the strictest code, and we're in the Bay Area. And 5 years ago, we amended the ADU ordinance with the city of San Jose to tiny homes on wheels, and we were allowed to use you as a third party based on your reputation, and that worked out well. So when we pull a permit, it's much less monies because all we're paying for is utility connection permits, and we're just hooking up the existing residents next to it. Furthermore, we had everything structurally engineered, and electrical engineered, and even plumbing engineered. So there's no question that we're going above standard of the codes, because we add much more than you require. And then also the engineering, they're built exactly like a residential home on a steel frame, which is the foundation. In fact, the engineers created 3 types of foundations: sit right on the wheels with jacks, and the engineered skirt we have, which will attach it to the ground, and then also the pier design. So you can take all 3 of those, whatever the homeowner wants. Some banks require a foundation under it, to take it as a being an ADU. So, and we never use the word modular either. It's a residential home. It's prefabbed in a shop and taken out to a site. And that's pretty much it. And it's
Absolutely.
been very successful. Yeah. Thanks
Very
to you
good.
guys too. You have been helpful.
Well, thank you, John. We appreciate all that you bring to the table too. So, and that's what our builders do. They bring us ideas, they bring us problems, and we try to solve their problems. You know, that's one of the things that that we have done. We want to be really responsive. We answer the phones and we give consultation with our inspectors and things like that. So we really try to work together to come up with these products that will help you when you're trying to talk to your jurisdiction to get tiny houses in. So, any other questions before we move on?
Just thank you for listening.
Yeah, no problem. Well, so first of all, we start out in the general of this standard talking about tiny houses are a transportable vehicle regulated for highway safety. That's one of the things that a lot of people don't realize, that when you take something on the highway, it needs to pass NHTSA and DOT and the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Regulations. And we inspect each trailer. We inspect your breakaway switch and we all your tires and your axles and your lights. And we want to make sure that when you bring it on to the highway, that as they begin to do inspections, and there's some push out there right now against the what modulars are using for trailers. They're not really legal. They really don't have any business being on the highway, but they've gotten away with them for years. And so we want to make sure as that push starts to happen, that our people have what they need and have the inspections that they need and have the seals and their certificates that they need to go on the highway legally. So we start talking about tiny houses. And in here, we talk about the purpose of the standard. We talk about the purpose is to establish residential level life safety criteria, preserve lawful highway transportability, recognizes tiny houses as distinct housing type, and distinguish tiny houses from recreational vehicles, provide uniform framework for manufacturers, builders, insurers, lenders, and jurisdictions, and support lawful placement of accessory dwelling units, primary residence, workforce housing, emergency housing, and similar residential applications, and encourage innovation and attainable housing while protecting occupant safety and public welfare. One of the things that has made this industry are the small manufacturers, the small builders that are out there being creative, and we don't want to create something that they're pushed out of the market, where the big guys come in and they have the money, they can mass produce things. We want to keep the creativity going, and we want to have a standard that encourages that. So we want to make sure that they're compliant to all the transport type things. And the intent is to establish a residential level safety and performance criteria while preserving the mobility characteristics unique to tiny houses. This is a NOAA dwelling standard, but also applicable federal regulations apply, applicable state or law apply, and applicable engineering. Let me fix that one if I can. Nope, that didn't work. Let me go back to that. And reference standards. We'll have to work on the layout here. That's a little bit off, Leanne. We'll have to do what we have to with that. Electrical requirements. We are going to use National Electric Code because it's very recognized. And Article 552. We also recognize International Plumbing Code, Universal Plumbing Code. They take precedence over the recreational vehicle standards. This standard is going to take precedence over that. A tiny house is constructed in accordance with the standard and shall be considered a tiny house on wheels dwelling unit. Is not intended to classify tiny houses as HUD manufactured homes. And that's very important, that we don't want to be classified as a HUD home, even though HUD homes can go down to 320 square feet. So if you build a manufactured home, which used to be called a mobile home, you can do it at 320 square feet, but we want to be totally separate from that as a new housing classification. And so we want to specifically not be in the manufactured home arena. Compliance with this standard will be demonstrated through third-party inspections, approved engineering documentation, manufactured certification, or the authority having jurisdiction approval. That authority having jurisdiction could be the county, city, or wherever the placement of the house happens. Now, alternative, we didn't want to do away with, even though we have a lot of prescriptive and performance type standards in here, we didn't want to do away with alternative methods. So if it meets or equivalent or greater in all these other areas, you certainly can use that now. So accessory dwelling unit is a secondary residential unit. Everybody kind of knows what these are. The AHJ, the chassis, the design life, the anticipated service life of the structure under the normal residential occupancy conditions. So we want to build these things that are going to last. We're going to talk about, it talks about emergency egress, openings, habitable space. A lot of them have lofts, so we want to put that in there. We want to differentiate between a park model RV, which is intended primarily for seasonal or temporary housing. What we want to define what permanent residential occupancy is. So occupancy of the dwelling as a primary residence for more than 180 days within a calendar year for permanent installations. The chassis remains integral even during the permanent installation, does not alter the classification, and transportability remains preserved unless converted under law. And sometimes you can file with the county for this to no longer be chattel or real property. You can actually apply for it to be, chattel property, you can actually apply for it to be real property as permanently attached to the land, and then it becomes taxable by the county. Now, here's the important one. Tiny houses on wheels transport a residential dwelling unit that is constructed on a wheeled chassis, is designed for highway transport, is intended for residential occupancy, contains independent living facilities for one or more persons, including provisions for living, sleeping, cooking, sanitation, and storage, is certified by the manufacturer as complying with all the applicable requirements of this NOAA dwelling standard, has a maximum footprint of habitable space of 400 square feet or less, and its designed function as a primary residence, accessory dwelling, a workforce housing, temporary housing, or similar residential occupancy, and is constructed in accordance with the structural, transportation, life safety, energy efficiency, and inspection requirements of this standard. For the purpose of this definition, lofts shall not be included in the calculation of habitable footprint area. Covered porches and decks and roof overhangs, exterior utility projections shall not be considered habitable space. We're talking about that 400 square foot, and the wheeled chassis shall remain an integral structural component. A tiny house constructed under the standard shall be recognized as a tiny house on wheels dwelling unit designed for full-time or long-term occupancy, and shall not be classified as a recreational vehicle, temporary camping unit, or a park model. And then we talk about what is a tiny house dwelling unit. It's intended and recognized as a residential structure designed to be movable without disassemble, capable of repeated or one-time transportable onto public roadways. And lastly, a wheeled chassis, a structural steel or a frame assembly equipped with axles, wheels, and towing components intended for transport. And then we go into the chapter 3, which is our administration. We give the authority from this. The authority having jurisdiction may adopt, amend, or supplement the standard. So we give them the ability to do that. Existing tiny houses are grandfathered in. Then we go and talk about the data plate, which we have implemented, but in this data plate, it may change just a little bit for this. Each tiny house should have a transportation compliance detail. That is a law that's out there that a lot of people aren't doing. But we're going to have that. You can get that from us if you would like. We're going to have that as a service that we will put together for you guys. We don't have it yet. We're just putting that into play. And then a permanent certification label from an accredited inspection agency, third party. And we need to change accredited to an approved or an accredited, because E541 is not an accreditation, and that can be used according to this standard. So make note of that if you're taking notes, Leanne. Inspections are pretty much the same: the chassis, the framing, the electric, plumbing. Mechanical inspection doesn't include any ductwork. Usually we don't see any ductwork in there, but mechanical, we're talking about your vents, your bath vents, your kitchen vents, and any air exchange ventilation that you may have in there. And your mini splits are pretty much what everybody uses in the tiny houses. Energy inspection, which is your insulation, your caulking, etc. A final life safety inspection and transport compliance verification. Let's move on here. Structure systems outside prescriptive requirements shall be designed by a licensed professional engineer. So anytime you want to do something different, you're certainly welcome to. We'll talk about the climate zones in Chapter 13. Conflicts, where there's a conflict, the more restrictive provision affecting the occupancy safety shall govern. If any word or section of the standard is found invalid, the remaining section shall remain in effect. So that's the general overview of this standard, guys. The rest of it's going to go into the details of the structure, the mechanical, plumbing, and all of that. And then we have some appendixes at the end. So in the case of time, we're not going to go through every little thing of all these chapters here, but I'll just skim through them real quick. And then if you have any questions, we'll go back to them at the end. So we start out with the structure, and we have, the dead load, live loads, snow loads, wind loads, seismic, transportation loads, torsion loads, because when you're traveling, you could have torsion loads on it too. Vibration when you're traveling, and dynamic highway forces. We have alternative structures. Now we have some prescriptive in here for wood construction houses, but we have somebody working on the cold form steel framing, and we are looking for someone to do prescriptive SIPS panels. So we're working on that. And so we want to have at least those, the wood frame prescriptive, cold form steel prescriptive, and structural steel prescriptive. And the rest of it can be performance-based if you want to do something else. And in that, there's your design loads, your floor, your sleeping, your roof loads, snow loads and dead loads, wind loads, seismic and transportation, dynamic loads. And then we have prescriptive for your wood here. So that's stuff that we already have for you. The wood walls and the framing and the sheathing, and that's all prescriptive loads here. And we got a lot of this from the American Wood Council. So if you have any questions, you can always go there. And they have a pretty good graph of everything. If you want to know how far you can span a 2x4 on your, let's say your rafter, you can go there, and it gives the type of wood and the span, 7 foot 4 inches or whatever, with that 2x4 or 2x6 or whatever you're using. Chapter 6 is on the chassis, which is the real meat here, because there's nothing else, no standards out there that really have a chassis and transportation chapter. So we're focusing on this chapter pretty heavily. We talk about the highway transportation, all the different loads, the tongue weights, tongue weight between 10 and 15% of the gross weight. We also have a table where, if a tiny house is a 24-foot tiny house, what's the, if in a loft, basically, we have a general idea of what the weight of that unit's going to be, how many axles you're going to need, and that kind of thing. It talks about the center of gravity, 60% forward and 40% toward the rearward. In other words, it doesn't matter measurement wise, it matters weight wise on these. You could have the loft and the bathroom and kitchen toward the tongue side, and you would need to move the center of gravity for the axle toward the tongue side to get your 60-40 for your transportation. Or if you have everything in the back, all the weight in the back, and you do a 60-40, you might have issues with fishtailing and trouble traveling down the highway. Then we talk about the approved materials, and there'll probably be more being put on there. Steel thicknesses are here, cross members types, and on center. So this is all prescriptive: outriggers, tongue assembly, axle attachments, corrosion protection. Now, if you want to use aluminum or galvanized, that's okay too. We don't have that in there. We probably need to put some of those things in there, and we'll adjust that as time goes on. We talk about welding, chassis deflection, and attachment to the structure, jacking and support points. Chassis systems outside this prescriptive requirement shall be engineered. So there's plenty of room for all kinds of chassis designs and construction. Then this is something new here too, foundations and anchoring. And we basically went to the HUD standard to come up with how do you anchor your tiny house down to the ground. And obviously this is going to it's going to change over time. It's going to get better over time, but this is just a starting point for permanent and semi-permanent installations. Prescriptive is concrete pads, CMU piers, steel support systems, helical piles are approved equivalents. Footings and pads, we talk about pad thickness, pad widths, concrete strengths. We put on undisturbed soil, compacted fill, and so organic and uncompacted are prohibited. We talk about pier construction, pier spacing, anchoring requirements, ground anchors, augers, and helical piles, and driven anchors, augers minimum of 4 feet in length, anchored spacing, strapping systems, chassis connections, wind resistance. We went middle of the road with the 130-mile-an-hour winds. If your jurisdiction requires more, you may need to get engineered for this attachment. And frost protection. I live in Florida. We don't have to worry about that, but we do have to have frost protection in the cold weather areas. So the foundation needs to go below the frost or have some way to protect from a frost heave. Site drainage is in here. Utility access, foundation system shall provide access to plumbing, electrical, gas, and chassis inspection points. Skirting shall not be used as structural supports unless specifically engineered. So if you do use skirting, you're welcome to use it as your support as long as it's engineered. And then you have all your alternative foundation systems that you have here. Then you have your building envelope, and that is you're concerned about water intrusion, air infiltration, condensation, thermal loss, ultraviolet degradation, transport vibration, and environmental exposure. So we have your weather protection, your exterior wall coverings, and one thing we don't address in here is the WUI code, where you have high fire type things that may need to be added later, but right now we don't have anything like that. But everything else we tried to cover. Your windows for water intrusion and air leakage, your glazing, safety glazing. We also have an emergency escape opening, but that's really in chapter 9. Your exit doors shall provide weather resistance, structural stability, air sealing. Permitted door types, we have all of those listed in here. A lot of people are going with those accordion glass doors now. They're real popular. So we made sure we put that in there. So we talk about your swing doors, your sliding doors, your accordion doors, your weather stripping, your flashing, transportation resistance to high vibration and pressures. Roof assemblies are in here for mainly water resistance. A lot of the challenges is if you use spray foam in your attic and you get a leak in the roofing material, you don't know you have a leak, and it starts rotting out your rafters because with closed cell spray foam, it glues itself, and we've seen an issue with that. So we got to make sure that when you put whatever you put as roofing material, that it is very, very good at keeping water intrusion out. Then we talk about your flashing, your air sealing, your thermal bridging. One of the things that we do focus on is when you have your trailer, we want to make sure that you put some kind of thermal bridge so that you don't transfer the cold and heat from the outside to the inside of the tiny house through some kind of thermal bridging. And one of the things we've seen a problem with is if you use this foam insulation, you have to use, I think it's 60-pound minimum, and some people are using the 25-pound, which will compress over time. And so you just be careful about that. And then you have your alternatives. You have fire and life, your smoke alarms, all about those, and your carbon monoxide alarms. Then we talk about means of escape in chapter 9, your flame spread ratings, your appliance and heat source things, your cooking, electrical, transportation. And chapter 9 is about your lofts, but in your lofts, talk about minimum loft areas, ceiling heights, slope ceilings, loft access and loft guards. A lot of people, we've seen these tiny houses that didn't have any loft guards, which is unsafe. So we have loft guards in there, opening limitations. So you can't, the loft guards, you can't put a 4-inch diameter sphere in there, which is basically a child's head. We don't want it to get stuck in there. We see some catwalks, so we added the catwalk specs in here for those of you that have dual lofts and the catwalk in between. The emergency egress opening, primary escape, minimum openings here. We have a 5.0 square foot minimum with a minimum height of 24 inches, minimum width of 24 inches, which is a little bit different from the RV standard or the IRC standard, but it certainly is going to meet the requirements of not only people getting out, but also rescue of firemen getting in to help rescue. Then we talk about the alarms and the natural light and ventilation, structural requirements for your lofts. Then we talk about your occupancy limits and alternative loft designs. I'm moving through this pretty quickly because we have a lot to go in a short time to get there. And you'll see all of this. Once we have this up on our website, you'll be able to come in here and read all of this. Then we talk about your plumbing systems. And, some of you will have gray water. So we have gray water and black water systems. Mechanical systems are in here, your dehumidification, bathroom exhaust fans, your fuel and gas systems are all in here. And your energy efficiency here is one chapter. We have a climate zone map. So based on your climate zone, when you put your data plate on there, you're going to delineate your climate zone. Here's a map, the southern states. Then you have your middle states there and your colder climates. So for your warmer climates, you can use R13, and R19 in the ceiling. In your moderate climates, it's R13, R19, and R30. In your cold climates, R15, R19, and R30. but just be aware that your jurisdictions could increase those. And certainly as a builder, you can increase those anytime you feel like you want to do that. Then we address the thermal bridging and the air sealing, house wrap, windows, doors, and your moisture control. Then we go into electrical, and basically one of the things that you need to be aware of in here that we do follow the National Electric Code for residential. So you'll have some arc fault breakers that you haven't had to do so far, your GFCI breakers in here. You're going to need 2 appliance outlets, 20 amp appliance outlets in here. So there's some restrictions. You have to have disconnects. You have to have a neutral and a ground bar separate. So these are just things that you need to be aware of in here for your changes in arc fault and GFCI. Grounding and bonding of the metal on the outside, your roofs and your sidings to the chassis, and the chassis grounded to the box on the inside in here. Then we talk about our third-party inspections, how you can do it, the manufacturer's responsibility, the approved inspection agencies. Generally, inspection agencies performing these inspections under this standard shall demonstrate competence in the inspection of tiny houses on wheels, transportable residential structures, factory-built and manufactured systems, and site-built residential structures. So we have E541 as accreditation, or ANSI accreditation, ISO 17020. There needs to be impartiality in here. You have to have inspectors need to be qualified, and we have the inspector philosophy there. We talk about the required inspections. What do you have to have construction documents. So this is what you'll put on your floor plan, your room layout, your dimensions, your lofts, your doors. Doesn't have to be fancy, but we do need to approve the plans. A sectional drawing that shows your wall, what your insulation is, and framing details and that kind of thing. Just a regular wall sectional. An electrical layout, which is going to show where your outlets are going to be, your lights and stuff like that. A plumbing fixture layout, and an elevation showing your different front, rear, and side elevations. And so that's going to be what you would be submitting for your plans. Then we have the inspection types that can either be remote or in person. They need to be digitized and stored for 5 years. We store ours longer than that, but we're going to ask the inspection agency that does this to at least store them for 5 years, unless it's required longer. And it's going to need to be inspected at all the different stages. And prior to closure, there's some things that need to be inspected before you close up your walls, your sheathing, and your insulation and stuff like that. Chassis and foundation inspection, framing inspection, rough plumbing, rough electrical, rough mechanical, insulation, and final. Then there's the manufactured certification paths. There's the path A, which is, we don't do this, but we will maybe go forward with this for some of our manufacturers. It's more expensive for a smaller manufacturer to go this route. But if you are going to build a lot, you can certify the manufacturing facility. And it's a little tougher to get this. But once you get that, then you can get your insignias or your seals, and inspection happens not on every unit, but only on your factory. And then the units, when we come there, we inspect what's on the line. Path B is for the smaller manufacturers, that it's an individual unit inspection where we inspect every unit, and it's documented and along the way. And you can, even if you're a big manufacturer, a large manufacturer, we have some large manufacturers that want every e- every um, thing inspected, not just the plant inspected. I see your hand, Leanne. So um, let me go ahead and get you to ask your question or whatever.
Is that Frank O'Neill? He had a question if we have considered the XI2 for tie downs.
Yes, Patrick. Yeah,
Oh,
it's
hi, Patrick.
it's the plate that's galvanized plate that goes under one of the stacks of blocks when you're tying it down, and you turn it upside down and it digs into the ground, and then it has a width and length stabilizer bar that
Mm.
go across the other side is to prevent turnover. We've used them because we're in Florida and just concerned about rollover. I was just wondering if you
Absolutely. No, I haven't. I haven't heard of that. If you could send us some information, we'd be happy to take a look at that. And that is key. Rollover is key. When you tying down your unit, you not only need to hold it down, but you have to hold it from rolling over or moving laterally. And so when we've seen these tie down designs by engineers and things like that, they not only tie the unit down so that it will avoid uplift, but they also have lateral anchors so that it won't roll over. And they're both ways, the long way and the short way. I've seen strapping on that. So yeah, send that over. We'd be happy to take a look at that.
okay,
Always looking
we'll
for
do.
the newest and greatest. So then you're going to get your labels and your seals. There's some corrective actions. You may have to reinspect prior to moving forward. And there's some things that will happen. You may have to stop. You may not have to stop, but that's all written in here. How how all this needs to be done so that you won't have any questions going down the road. So that is the whole thing. Um, and we put this is kind of neat. Alternative systems may include automated digital inspection platforms, AI assisted documentation review, enhanced engineering verification, or equivalent approved inspection technologies. As AI is developing, we want our inspection capabilities to be up to date on the latest and greatest in the AI development. So I'm going to run through these real fast here, and then we'll be done. We might, if you don't mind, we might run just a little bit over. The first appendix is all about transportation. Appendix B is about permanent installation, your foundations and your connections, and this will expand as we get better along the way. Appendix C is our referenced sources. Materials were from technical guidance, industry best practices, safety principles, engineering concepts, and supplemental information. We use the model codes of International Residential Code, International Building Code, International Plumbing Code, International Mechanical, Fuel and Gas, Energy Conservation Code, also NFPA 70, 54, 58, and 1192, the American Wood Council, the American ASTM. We used ISO, IEC. We used the RV standards to reference some things. We also used publications from the Tiny House Alliance publications out there, and some of the NOAA certification publications. And then we used transportation and vehicle from the DOT, from NHTSA, and we use propane and fuel gas industry publications. And there's links here if you want to go deeper into the reference material that we used here. Building science and moisture management, electrical safety references from National Electric Code and mechanical references about the ERVs and the HRV systems. And then this appendix, informational technical references used during the development of the standard. The inclusion of this publication or organization does not imply endorsement, adoption of the entire publication, or mandatory compliance beyond the requirements specified stated within the standard. Users of the standards remain responsible for determining applicable laws, adopted codes, manufacturer instructions, engineering requirements, and jurisdictional regulations applicable to individual tiny house projects. So you can use these, but you really need to get into your AHJ and get buy-in for those, and that's why we encourage you to do that. Last appendix is a commentary. It is not part of the standard, and it's not mandatory. So we just have some general things, some propane knowledge that propane is heavier and it falls, and moisture ideas and transportation ideas and high wind commentary, fire extinguisher commentary. The RV standard has fire extinguishers in there, but in the housing standards, we don't really see that. So you may want to include that somewhere in your build. And so we had that in there, the height and location. And because tiny houses contain relatively small conditioned volumes, excessive installation thickness may provide diminished returns while reducing valuable interior space. We put that in there for the jurisdictions to say, oh, well, why aren't you requiring R38 in the ceiling? Well, it's because they're smaller houses, and the more insulation you put in there, you have a diminished return. Whew. That's all I have for you guys. So I'm going to open it up for any questions you may have. And if you have to run, I understand we're going to try to keep this to an hour, and we've kind of run over a little bit. So Andy, go ahead. What you got?
Yeah, I was wondering, I'm watching on my phone, so I couldn't see the thing on the energy standards necessarily, but I was wondering if there was any thought to adding, you know, how in the residential code, there's cavity insulation values are one thing, and then cavity plus exterior insulation is another. So if there was so we've been putting like a full inch of polyiso on top of our roof sheathing, and then go in the metal roof on top of that in order to get, and then we fill our cavity with the R23. And so we get we're at R29.4 or something like that, you know, so it's kind of it's a little weird, but that, you know, that's going to perform better than R30, or even I think it'll perform better than closed cell spray foam on a more consistent basis. I was just wondering if that was any thought to adding some exterior insulation standards in addition to the cavity fill.
Well, we have the prescriptive standards of R30 or R19. You know, some jurisdictions increase it to R30. So if you can show that, you know, you can see.
But in the IRC, value, in the IRC, they allow a lower total, you know, R value. If you you know, you might be able to go with a lower cavity fill if you add continuous exterior insulation. I'm not, you know, if you go with R23 cavity fill rock wool plus an inch of polyiso, you know that's better than R30 cavity fill, right? You know, and that's in the IRC. But I was just wondering if we could add something like that into this standard. You know, R23 rock wool plus an inch of polyiso is not technically, it's R29 point something, right? So it's I mean.
Yeah, this standard maximum in the ceiling, well, it does have an R30 in the colder climates. So like I said at the beginning, this is a work in progress, and we wanted to get something out there and adjust it as time goes on with more and better things like that, like different anchors and what have you. So feel free to send that in, and we'll have our inspectors take a look at it. We'll put it out there to the community, and And if it makes sense, we can certainly add it to it.
Sure, fair
Not
enough.
a problem.
Thanks. Sounds great, though. Good
Thanks,
work.
Andy. Yeah.
Well, then I have a
I
couple
think
things.
I think TJ, did you have a question?
No, but I apologize. I was not able to get my video to work. Good to see you guys.
Oh, you too.
No, I applauded.
Oh, I
It,
gotcha.
it
Well,
was a
thank
clap.
you. Oh, okay.
Yep.
I
Thank
gotcha.
you.
Well, thank you.
Yep.
Yes. And we do have a question from Sky Alexandria. When will this? Yeah, we talked about this before we all got together tonight. When will this become available to us through the website, Robin? I know we were going to talk about it and
Yeah.
make a final.
Well, right now, we're in the development, finalization of it. That's why we wanted to have this tiny talk so that we could get a little bit of feedback before we go publish it. And so we will be publishing it soon. I don't know exactly when it's going to be out there, but we'll send out an email as soon as it's published. We have a few more tweaks we need to put on it. It's not quite there yet. And this is copyrighted by the nonprofit. We have NOAA Certified Inc. is a for-profit organization, but we didn't want to look like we were going to profit off of this. We're not selling it right now. We may someday charge for this, but we just wanted no questions. Like, we didn't want to have any kind of, NOAA certified has, did this, or, so we did it through the nonprofit. We're not going to make any money off of it. We're just doing it as a service to the industry. And so we have it copyrighted to the nonprofit. And as soon as we can go public with it and publish it, we will, and it'll be on our website as a standard for tiny houses on wheels.
Yeah, Vera, did you have a question? I see you asked to have more time for questions, so we do have a question and answer period, and you could ask during the presentation. So if you have a question, you want to ask your question?
No, stop it.
Okay,
Well, here's the thing.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Here's the thing. You've downloaded all this info to us, and I get it. But at the same time, many states don't allow us as detached ADUs. In Massachusetts, we have a wonderful governor who allowed ADUs by right. But we're in a scenario where third-party inspectors don't know how to inspect a tiny house. And the AHJs, the authorities having jurisdiction, meaning inspectors, cannot inspect us. So we're in a catch-22. What's the solution?
I wish I knew. The solution is to get with the AHJ and find out what they're looking for. I mean, obviously, we're a third-party agency. We're accredited to inspect factory-built houses. We're accredited to inspect tiny houses on wheels. So we have the accreditation to do the inspection. And if the jurisdiction would like to have us do those inspections, if they'll approve us to do those inspections, we have the capability to do the inspections, record the inspections, and give them to the authority having jurisdiction. So what we're trying to do here, Vera, is create a path for jurisdictions that don't have the vehicle to allow tiny houses on wheels in to create something that they can use. It may not be perfect yet, but it is something. It's a work in progress, but it is something they can turn to. And so once this goes public, you might just give it to them, send it to them, and say, "Hey, would you approve this write an ordinance approving this as a way to allow these tiny houses as ADUs in Massachusetts.
Well, here's the thing. You know, I'm in a catch-22 because the AHJ cannot inspect me. And the third-party inspectors, 3 of them I've talked to in my state, know nothing about tiny houses. And they're like sitting here saying, I can charge you $500 for inspecting your place, but get this, I can't give you a certificate of occupancy, nor can the AHJ. So, hello, how
I
am I
would,
supposed to proceed? And I've spent 2.5 years doing attending all the ICC 1215 standard. So I'm sitting here thinking, how am I to go forward?
yeah, I can't give you the perfect scenario there, Vera. Wish I could. Ideally, if if there was a consensus standard that would come down that you could point to, maybe in a few years there will be. But for right now, all I can say is take what you have, take our three standards, or take the latest standard that we just talked about, and take it to them and say, we have a standard here. It talks about how these things are inspected and certified. It has everything in there that you need. It has the chassis. It has everything that you need. Can you add this to your either an ordinance of some way that we can do this? That's the only thing I can come up with. I mean, these jurisdictions are going to do what they're going to do, and I know you've been struggling with this for a long time, Vera. I've been seeing you on these talks and at the different shows and things like that, and hopefully you're still in your house and you still have it where you want it to be. But if we can help you in any way, we will. We're willing to talk to the commissioners or the building department if you need for us to. So we'd be happy to help you out however way you can. All we can do right now is basically publish this, put it out there, and see what happens to it.
Well, here's the thing. I put a bill before the Massachusetts legislature to legalize this form of tiny housing. I'm in my second session with this bill. And, they all want to say positive things about it. They've co-sponsored the bill, but here's the thing. Nobody wants to allow tiny houses in Massachusetts. So I'm sitting here thinking, oh my gosh, I've spent 7.5 years in a bill that I wrote before the legislature and it's not passing. And I'm thinking, what are our chances of tiny houses being accepted in states? It has been accepted in several, but at the same time, what do you recommend for us?
I don't really have a recommendation other than just keep it in front of your state legislators, and hopefully someday they'll see the light. That's all I can tell you, Vera, is just keep plugging forward and hope for the best. But we're just we're just one person over here, but we're a group of people, all of us trying to make this industry better, and maybe someday it'll get good enough that Massachusetts will say yes to it.
Sarah, I would just stay very persistent with whoever it is you're dealing with in the municipality. We have a few different people that have succeeded in getting their tiny home, like Melanie Copeland in Virginia. Very first, they said, no, no, no. She just kept at it. She was like a pit bull gnawing at their ankles, and they finally gave in. Gabrielle Crowdis in, I believe it's Minnesota. They use the religious, I can't remember the whole name of the act, but church grounds have the right to put tiny home communities on their property. Watching the video when she was at the city commissioner meetings, all of the meetings when they finally passed it, I mean, I personally cried watching that video. So, I mean, she also was very persistent in getting that passed, and we certify both of those. We certified. So I would just say, personally, stay persistent and don't give up.
It's been 7.5. I've been working on this. I'm 70. So I'm like thinking, am I gonna go into the ground not being legal?
Just Vera, stay strong. Stay
Yeah.
strong. Well, we've run over time. Leanne, can you kind of close us out? And then if you want to
I
stay
did
on,
just
Vera,
want
and talk
to,
some more.
yeah, David just asked a question about 8.5. Or are we seeing more of 10 feet wide on the width, which I wish Rich was on. He apparently couldn't make it, but I think we're seeing a little bit more of 8.5, but 10 has become a little more popular. So
Yes.
but yeah, so everybody, thank you for joining. I know some people dropped off, but this will be put on our YouTube channel within a few days as soon as our IT guru gets it uploaded. And that'll be, just look for that on the NOAA certified YouTube. Thanks everybody for coming, and we will see you soon.